Welcome to the sketch step. In this step, we will decide the composition of the previously selected elements by creating a quick sketch, so we get a clear idea of how the finished artwork will look like. We will start by opening Adobe Photoshop and creating a new file. This file's dimensions are going to be 30 by 30 centimeters and have a resolution of 300 dpi. We will also name the file album cover before starting. Once the file has been created, let's start by adding a new layer using the new layer icon at the base of the layer panel on the right. Once this is done, let's press Ctrl plus G while the layer is selected so we can add it to a folder which we will rename to Sketch. Let's start working on this layer using the basic default brush and changing the color of it to a desaturated blue tone. Since this is a sketch, details won't be needed. So let's increase the size of the brush to around the 40-point mark. First off, let's start by setting up the margins for the illustration. These margins will be useful so we can keep every important element within a certain boundary, and none of them will be off too much to the side or lacking space. You don't want your elements to be scattered to the edges of the illustration where they will seem less important than they should. These margins don't have to be 100% precise. They are just guidelines, so we have some limits when creating the composition. After creating the guidelines, be sure to redo them again with the brush tool, since there's usually an issue with Photoshop and guidelines, which distorts the brush tool when going over them. To avoid this, we will be tracing the guidelines real quick while holding the Alt key for straight lines. Once these are done, go to View, Show, Guides to hide them. We will also reduce the opacity of our margins to around the 20% mark and rename the layer appropriately. In a new layer, which will be named Sketch, we will start to make a quick draft of what our illustration will be like. I'll start by sketching one of the main elements that we previously selected, the big manga-style speech bubble, with the katakana characters which spell the band's name. Be sure that any text that you will be including remains within the margin that we previously created. For example, the katakana characters I added are within the margin space. Once the bubble is done, I'll start a quick sketch of what later on will be the female character. This is a really quick sketch, so it's not the time to think much about proportions and making clean lines. Right now, I'm rendering what the pose of the character will be, and a tentative outfit for it. I want the pose to have attitude, so it goes along with the music vibe of the whole album, as well as it to be dynamic, so it communicates nicely with the other elements that I'll be adding along the sketch. Remember that during the sketch step, you can move the elements quite freely, without the fear of messing up the line art or having to redo parts of the illustration. So play around as much as you like until you're satisfied with the general composition of your artwork. In this case, I'm using the lasso plus transform tool to move the character a bit since I felt it was a bit too much to the left side and was leaving too much space on the right side of the illustration. I'm finally adding some flowing hair to the character, so it adds a bit more movement to it and complements the whole character's pose. I will now be adding some waves that will work as background for the illustration. This will flow behind the character and have some small swirls on the ends. The general direction will be curved towards the left, so it can complement the main characters whose pose points to the right. While working on this part, I'm also erasing unneeded lines, for example the structural lines on the character, and adding lines which tell me the places where small details will be placed afterwards. The next element I will be adding is the koi fish. I'll be placing it on the lower left corner since it's looking quite empty as of right now. Just as the other two elements, the fish will have a curved composition and look as if it was jumping right out of the water. This element has quite a simple shape, so I'll be also adding some big lips and big eyes along with the fins, and some water splashing around it. Keep in mind that these details must follow the composition of the element you're working on at the moment. Finally, I'll be adding some of the other elements that we had selected beforehand. I'm giving the speech bubble some volume so it pops out even more, and some comic style lightnings and stars which point at the main character. I want this to bring more attention to the characters, so I'm directing their movements towards it. I will also add some sushi pieces which will intertwine and mix with the wave in the background. This is the first step for the sketch. Now we will be cleaning it up a bit so it's ready for the liner step. The cleanup is a really easy step. We will start by reducing the opacity of our first sketch and start making some clean lines over it. For example, I'm taking a bit more of time on the character's jacket shape, so the line art afterwards is easier to create. The same goes for the accessories and basically every element in the composition. This is an optional step, since some individuals will rather have a cleaner sketch to work the line art over, rather than a raw one which doesn't have too much defined shapes to follow. Either way is good, it just depends on your preference when working on a drawing. Personally, I prefer to do this second revision of the sketch so it can be the closest possible to what the final artwork will look like. This is also really useful when working with clients. In this case, the best idea is that the sketch represents the final work as much as possible, so the cleaner and more understandable the better. Also, regarding the client topic, I like giving each element a different hue or a certain tone as to separate the illustration and give it a bit of depth. This will help the client understand the composition better, and there will be no drastic revisions to it along the way. As a tip, I'll tell you that the clearer the sketch, the better for both you and the client. Once this revised sketch is done, let's move on to the line art step, where we will clean up the illustration and create the final outlines for it. Let's continue.